Chris Jericho opened up on his podcast this week about the pulmonary embolism that he suffered last year when he was on tour with Fozzy in Europe. If you remember, back in December, he had some kind of medical issue that landed him in the hospital, and he was forced to miss some shows. We didn't know what the problem was, but he spoke about it at length for the first time, and it was pretty scary stuff. So for those who don't know, a pulmonary embolism, it's a blood clot that forms, usually in the leg, and it travels up to a person's lungs, and it then blocks one of the main arteries. He was first starting to notice symptoms when he was on stage. It was an event in Newcastle. And he's on stage, and he noticed he was short of breath, and he was gasping for air to the point where he couldn't get through all the lyrics to the songs. So he called his doctor back home, told him that it could be blood clots and that they would do scans to find out when he got back to the States. But when the same thing happened after another show, his doctor told him to get to the hospital right away. He didn't take the doctor's advice, and he kept performing until finally he had a doctor visit him in his hotel in London. And the doctor did some tests, and he confirmed that he had blood clots. And again, he was told, basically, get your ass to the ER. So he gets to the hospital. He could barely walk. He says it was a struggle just to be in the lobby and walk from one end of the room to the other. All of a sudden, it's like he would take 3 steps and he would be huffing and puffing, and his heart was pounding like he just ran 5 miles. And he said it was terrifying. And they did a CT scan, and it showed that his lungs were filled with blood clots. And he was adamant about not using a wheelchair and not wearing a hospital gown. He fought them on that. They wanted him to wear the gown. He said no. To be fair, I hate wearing those gowns too. I at least wore my underwear when I had to wear them. I was not doing it any other way. You're not going to catch me walking around with my bare ass hanging out the back of one of those things. But he said he didn't want to wear it because the minute that he did, in his mind, it would feel like more of a permanent stay. And he didn't like that. So they put him on blood thinners, but his oxygen level continued to go down, so they put him on oxygen. When they wouldn't let him leave the hospital, that's when we got those announcements that Fozzy had canceled their remaining shows. Even after he got home, he wasn't allowed to wrestle because of the blood thinners that he was on, and his doctor told him he needed to also lose some weight. So I'm sure you remember how bloated Jericho looked last year. He was starting to look like Fat Elvis. He revealed that he was 241 pounds. But he claims that he was never out of shape cardio-wise. He was never blown up in a match. He could do all the things that he used to do. But he did say that he first gained or started to gain weight after working the match with Kenny Omega a few years ago at the Tokyo Dome. And he started working with a weight loss clinic, and at first he just wanted to lose 10 pounds. He lost 11 pounds in the first week. And he saw that and he thought, well, let's stick with this and see how it goes. And today he is down to 209 pounds. He has lost 32 pounds since January, and most of that came between January and April. He's still on the blood thinners. He takes them twice a day. He says there's a chance, he's been told, that if things keep moving in the right direction, he might not have to be on them at all. But he said it was a wake-up call, that he needed to take better care of himself, and now he feels like he's having this career resurgence. You know, the weight loss was definitely noticeable when he came back in February. He looks much better, much healthier than he did last year. So does Jon Moxley. You know, before Moxley checked himself into rehab and ditched the booze, I mean, go back and look at photos of Jon Moxley before he went away for those few months. Just his face alone. How puffy and bloated. That was from all the alcohol. You know, I'm sure it was the same with Jericho. You know, Jericho's got Grey Goose running through his veins. You cut him open, you're going to be able to pour glasses of Grey Goose. I'm sure that had a lot to do with all the weight that he gained too. When Moxley came back, I remember I said, look, it's Dean Ambrose. Where's he been? He looks so much better. So let this be a lesson. You got to take care of yourself. You know, when I'll share a personal story here. You guys know, if you've been listening to the podcast for a long time, I haven't really talked about this much recently, but I did at the time. You know, when I got my blood cancer diagnosis 6 years ago, I was scared shitless. And I was lucky because it wasn't anything serious enough that I needed, chemo right away or any sort of immediate treatment, but it scared me because my mother had leukemia. And don't think that it's not on my mind that I'm only 4 years away from being the same age that she was when she was first diagnosed. I think about that a lot. But I hear the words blood cancer, and that's the first thing I thought of. But thankfully, I take a baby aspirin every day, and I get my blood checked every couple of months. And for the time being, that's really all that I need to do. I know at some point that's going to change, and we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But that was my wake-up call. I remember when the pandemic first started, and I said, I'm not going to sit around. I'm not going to put on 20 pounds. But the gyms were closed, so that didn't help. But you got to take care of yourself. That's very important. I dropped 30 pounds in 12 months without using a single piece of gym equipment. A lot of it a lot of it does just come down to what you eat. You can't outrun a shitty diet. It's true. I'm still learning that. But anyway, the Jericho stuff made me think of that, and maybe somebody hears this and it makes them stop and think about taking their own health a little more seriously. We got a health update this week from Big E. There was good news as far as how he's feeling, and not so good news if you are hoping to ever see him back in the ring again. In a 4th of July tweet, he said, "Update, my C1 isn't ossifying, or forming bone, quite yet. The current plan is to get more scans at the 1-year mark and see how it is progressing. The great news is I feel tremendous and surgery is off the table." It was in March that he got dropped on his head by Ridge Holland and had his neck broken. He's very lucky to be alive and not to be paralyzed. C1 injuries can be fatal. They're very scary. And from that same night, when we saw him, that very same night, we saw him post that video of himself in the hospital. Ever since that night, he has kept a positive attitude. I think if the world had even half the positivity, just in general, that this guy has, it would be a better place. But I also thought this guy may never wrestle again. That's how I felt at that time. It was a very serious injury. And if he doesn't, I'm at least glad that he was able to call himself WWE champion. At least he got that money in the bank moment and he got to cash in, and not everybody gets to call themselves the champion. And again, his run was not a great run, and I don't even put the blame on him for that. Again, what did I say earlier when I was talking about Sasha and Tony Khan? It all comes down to the booking. But at least he was able to have that moment. Based on what he's saying here, we know that they won't even take scans. They won't even look until next March. That would be 1 year since the injury. And even then, there's no guarantee it'll be healing the way that they're hoping. Evidently, right now, it isn't, healing the way that they want it to be healing even now. But he's out of the neck brace. And it's great that he doesn't have to go under the knife, but I would be very surprised to see him resume a full-time career after this. Right now that isn't even really important. I'm just happy to see that he's feeling good. He's able to live an otherwise normal life. He's out and about. Because somebody without the musculature that he has, if they get dropped on their head the way that he did, I don't think they're able to walk around on their own 2 feet ever again. All things considered, he's a very lucky man.